Occult Confessions is brought to you commercial-free through the generous support of our patrons. Visit occultconfessions.com and click on Donate to help keep the history of the occult on the digital airwaves.
Chaos magic is a topic for which we receive regular requests, and a topic I've been, frankly, putting off long enough. Chaos magic is often presented as a complex and mysterious practice, with Osman Spare, the artist regarded as its founder, lurking as a dark and unfathomable figure, lost to history. In truth, chaos magic is no more complicated than any of the subjects we cover on the podcast, and Spare no more incomprehensible than any of the magicians we've discussed. My reason for delaying has had more to do with my awareness that we have many chaos magicians listening, and none of the alchemical actors, including myself, have much experience with chaos magic. But we're not here to offer tips and tricks for creating your best sigil. Our work has to do with figuring out the history and philosophy of what has become one of the most recent occult movements to achieve widespread interest and practice, at least among the community of folks who tend to listen to podcasts like ours. So, let's begin at the beginning, with a man who was delightfully eccentric, remarkably creative, and wanted nothing more than to scandalize traditional culture, albeit in a more playful and artistic way than contemporaries like Aleister Crowley. Artistic prodigy, proto-surrealist, occult maverick, and person who rejected Adolf Hitler. Ladies and gentlemen, today I give you the godfather of chaos, Osman Spare. My name is Rob C. Thompson. I am your supreme hierophant of the Secret Order of Alchemical Actors. I am joined today by our Knight of the Dangling Serpent, Jacob Wheatley.
Yo, yo, yo. It's me.
Yo. Yo ho ho. And a barrel of rum. And as is traditional, Olivia Littoral, Grand Master of the Order.
Hello.
So guys, I know this is going to come as unwelcome news to both of you, but this is our Christmas episode, basically. This is the last episode before the holiday.
Boo.
Boo that there won't be another episode before Christmas.
Boo, Christmas. Yeah, down with Christmas.
Yeah. I've got to say, I've always had mixed feelings about the holiday. I think I wouldn't be so hostile to the Christmas season if it just happened on like a day or even a week. Like if it was a week of Christmas, I think I might be all right with it.
For
or
sure.
a day of Christmas, but there's so much Christmas in America. Like our European listeners and folks in Australia, I don't know. I've never been outside of the U.S. at Christmas time. I've been all over the world, but I've never been. Yeah, it's always spring. I'm traveling or fall. So let us know. I'd be curious to know. Does Christmas just explode all over you, beginning around November 1st, like the day after Halloween?
It's like people, as soon as Halloween is done, they're like, I have my tree up, it's November 1st, and it's like, we didn't even vote yet. Like, chill.
Exactly.
Oh.
I do have a toddler now, so we're gonna go out tomorrow and celebrate a pagan tradition and cut down some greenery and bring it into the house.
Hell yeah, get that Yule log.
Yeah.
Yeah, get that Yule log.
Hashtag get that Yule log.
Yeah.
Are you guys doing anything for the holiday?
No, I'm trying to avoid people as much as I can, which is a usual Christmas tradition for me. Stay inside and not talk to anyone.
Well, I mean, it's a COVID holiday, so we're not traveling.
That's true.
So.
My mom just let me know that she never actually took down her fake tree. It's just been hiding in like a closed off like front room. Like,
she threw a
living
blanket
room.
over it?
No, no one goes in there. It's like a formal room. So like
fancy.
she
Just closed the doors.
Yeah, the drawers are just closed and like she's just kept it up, decorated, and she's just like, I don't have to
open
do
the
it
doors.
now.
It's been like polished in time.
Yeah, so
I love that. Props to her. That's fantastic. She's the Miss
told her-
Haversham of Christmas.
I told her it was brilliant, to be honest, because
Yes.
you know.
This is our Christmas room. We close it, and then we
Yeah.
open it.
We open
We
the room one
'cause-
time a year.
We only go in there on Christmas morning, like, so it's like, I don't know, it's very weird.
We, the members of the Secret Order
of
of Alchemical Actors, do solemnly commit ourselves
to
to a full and honest telling
of
the history of the occult
as
as far as we know it. Let's open up those plugs.
Plug. Plug. Plug.
So yes, we did pre-record our last episode at the end of the Evil Spirit series, so we've got a lot of patrons to thank today. Again, so grateful, especially at this time of year, and with COVID all around us yet again, but vaccines on the horizon. We want to give a special thanks to the folks who were able to join our patron crew, and love to the people who have had to leave the patron crew for financial reasons. We understand it is tough times and hope to see you back when you're able to. No rush. We want to thank Eileen C. and Gwali, Twitch2, not Twitch1, but Twitch2,
Yes.
Leilani M,
Aw.
Adriana P, Savannah S, Chelsea K, Swaraset N.
Oh.
Hope I did that one well. If not, let us know, Swaraset.
Yeah. Please correct us.
Yeah, we're open to that. And that's it for our patrons. Thank you very much, friends.
Welcome. Thank
Lovely
you.
to have you.
Yes.
I'm going to do a couple of shout-outs off the OC because it's the holiday season. We want to be generous. Some new friends we've made this last season, really, in the last few months. First, the Urban Conservatory Occult Discord. So these folks run classes, and I had the chance to visit Orion and the folks in the Urban Conservatory class. So check them out on Discord. I've only had access to Discord a couple of times, and generally through people who are better at this than me. So I don't know how you find them on Discord, but those of you who do know, Jacob, you know these things.
You just have to get the link from them to join the server.
Well, where would you have to go to get the link? You have to find them on social media?
Yeah, you would have to contact them typically, or sometimes if they have a Instagram or Facebook or something, a lot of servers, they'll just put the link in their bio typically. But if not, it's easier to just reach out to them.
Well,
Yeah,
find us on
maybe-
social media and we'll link to them.
Maybe we can put it in the Facebook
Yeah.
group or something.
Yeah, we'll put it.
I know a lot of
yeah.
people have messaged me before asking about where can I find occult groups or occult learning groups, whatever you wanna. So, yeah,
Yeah,
that would be
and they
good.
listen to our podcast over at the Urban Conservatory, so super cool. And I do want to mention Lux Occult just one more time. The Lux Occult podcast that I did an episode on over with Luxa, and we're going to have Luxa come and guest with us because it's a Chaos Magic
Oh.
podcast she runs.
Nice.
Okay, let's close up those plugs.
Plug, plug, plug.
Austin Osman Spare was born on the 20th of December, 1886. This is perfect timing, right? In honor of his birth.
Oh, I was like, what?
Yeah, we're just a couple days away.
1886. Yeah. I
Well, when
didn't
we post this, we're only going to be a couple days away from his birthday.
Yeah, I didn't get that.
But no, it's not 1886, Olivia. I agree.
Now I understand. It's 10:30, guys. I'm not here. I'm sorry.
This is early for Olivia.
It is.
Brunch is early in the morning.
Yes.
So Spare was the son of a policeman and the grandson of a Marine on his mother's side. He would grow up having a better relationship with his father, actually, than his mother. He grew up in the middle-class London neighborhood of Kensington. Oh, Kennington. Sorry, not Kensington. Kennington. He was an athletic child and enjoyed boxing, wrestling, cycling, and even cricket,
Oh.
which is
How classic.
incomprehensible to us
The
Americans.
fanciest
Yeah.
of sports.
Please. We do not understand.
The fancy
I mean,
sport that
golf
can go
is
on for
pretty-
days,
I
right?
played it one time.
You played cricket,
I
Jacob?
did.
How long did it last? Did you play a full long ass game?
I
or
tried
just,
to.
a-
It didn't work out too well.
Yeah.
They tried teaching.
You just
yeah,
left?
No, they tried teaching me as I was playing, and it didn't work out.
If it's not Alice in Wonderland themed, I'm not into it.
Yeah.
You know?
Croquet, you mean?
Yeah, in the movie. When
Yeah,
they-
that's not
Different
cricket.
things.
That's croquet.
Oh shit!
Yeah,
Really?
those are not the same thing.
Damn. What the
This
do
is-
I know?
We're here to learn.
Yeah.
We're here to learn.
Wait, what's the? No, this is so off topic. You
Cricket
can't
is
teach me the difference
cricket's
right
like
now.
baseball, but it's not baseball.
Yeah, you
But
had
what's
a
the
paddle.
difference between?
Croquet is just it's like a lawn
Yeah.
sport.
I thought
It's not
they
even a
both
sport, I
were
don't
lawn
think.
sports.
Kinda.
No.
Oh, wait.
Cricket's like a real
What are they playing in Heathers?
That's
Jacob?
croquet.
also croquet.
Oh, okay. Got it.
I've also seen Heathers. Spare
Okay,
was
well-
particularly interested. Spare. Let's get back to Spare.
I'm sorry.
Our poor audience have been waiting. We've been
I'm so
yammering
sorry,
about Christmas.
Okay.
Austin Osman Spare was particularly interested in drawing. He liked to draw and spent most of his free time with pencil and paper. He drew caricatures to amuse his classmates, and his father hung his work on the walls, taking great pride in his son's art. Yeah, that's sweet, yeah. Spare, who had a tendency to self-mythologize, albeit with a grain of truth in the stories he told about his life, described his mother as cold, claiming that she never kissed him.
Oh.
He developed a second maternal relationship with a woman named Mrs. Patterson, a person who may or may not have existed. According to Spare, she indoctrinated him into the world of magic and occultism and started him on a path that would lead him to study the work of Helena Blavatsky and meet Aleister Crowley.
Woo!
Spare referred to Mrs. Patterson, a fortune teller who never accepted a fee for her services, as a second mother, and claimed she was the only person he'd ever met who could materialize her own thoughts. Often, in the midst of discussing the future with a client, Patterson would materialize the event she foretold, and that event always came to pass. Spare also accomplished this feat, but more erratically. He couldn't control it as well. And that was later in life. His friend, admirer, and fellow occultist, Kenneth Grant, told the story of two dabblers in the occult coming to call on Spare to conjure an elemental. So let's hear a little illustration from Grant of how Spare was able to perform this trick.
Spare tried to dissuade them, explaining that such creatures were subconscious autonoma, inhibiting the human psyche at levels normally inaccessible to the conscious mind. As they almost always embodied atavistic urges and propensities, it was an act of folly to invoke them, as their intrusion into waking life could be extremely dangerous. But the Smatters did not take him seriously. Using his own method of elemental evocation, Spare set to work. Nothing happened for some time, then a greenish vapor resembling fluid seaweed gradually invaded the room. Tenuous fingers of mist began to congeal into a definite, organized shape. It entered into their midst, gaining more solidity with each successive moment. The atmosphere grew miasmic with its presence, and an overpowering stench accompanied it. And in the massive cloud of horror that enveloped them, two pinpoints of fire glowed like eyes, blinking at an idiot face which suddenly seemed to fill all space. As it grew in size, the couple panicked and implored Spare to drive the thing away. He banished it accordingly. It seemed to crinkle and diminish, then it fell apart like a blanket, swiftly disintegrating. But while it had cohered and hung in the room like a cloud, it was virtually opaque and tangible, and it reeked of evil.
Grant reported undoubtedly via Spare himself that within weeks one of the pair was dead and the other committed to an asylum. In 1900, at the age of 13, Spare was apprenticed to a printer and poster designer, Sir Joseph Costin, and the Sons of the Clapham Road. Oh, Sons on the Clapham Road. Either way. When some design work he was doing on his lunch break was noticed by two well-connected visitors, they recommended him to the Royal College of Art in South Kensington. Kensington this time. He was tall and handsome, but young and shy, and perceived as aloof by most of the other students at the college, except, that is, for Sylvia Pankhurst, daughter of the political activist Emmeline Pankhurst, a very... If you're from the UK, I'm sorry, you already know this, but Emmeline Pankhurst is a major feminist figure and suffrage figure of the 19th century. Sylvia would go on to become a leading figure in England's suffrage movement herself, going to prison 15 times over during her lifetime, where she was often force-fed because she would go on hunger strikes while imprisoned.
That's a tough bitch.
Yeah. Pankhurst and Spare would be lifelong friends starting at the college, which was an art college that was widely considered an inferior place to try and acquire anything like skills in art. Regardless of his poor training, Spare's natural talent shone through, and he became a kind of teenage prodigy. In 1904, at the age of 17, he had his first public showing at the Newington Public Library, and his father submitted 2 of his drawings to the Royal Academy of Arts. One of the pieces, a bookplate, was accepted, making Spare the youngest exhibitor at the time, if not in the history of the Academy. His sudden success at such a young age catapulted him to a kind of instant celebrity, but the attention and pressure were not especially welcome, becoming a source of tremendous stress and anxiety for the young artist. It's that child star phenomenon, right? Like you're at the top of the world when you're 17 years old. What do you do next?
It only goes down from there.
It's true.
Right? In the same year, he told a local newspaper that he'd begun devising his own religion.
Oh,
What?
Wow,
okay, never mind. It just keeps going
Right
up.
to the newspaper.
Yeah. He's already on a, who are the Smith's kids, Will Smith's kids? He's already doing that whole
Damn.
thing.
Yeah.
He's made friends with the poet and occultist Victor Neuburg at this time, best known to our listeners for serving as apprentice to Aleister Crowley during his Enochian rituals in the deserts of Algiers in 1909. Guys, remember Victor Neuburg? He played the violin and his hair got styled like devil horns.
How could I forget?
So, in 1907, Spare published his pagan-inspired Book of Satyrs, featuring satyr-like men in various scenarios, and one of Spare's most famous self-portraits at a desk surrounded by masks and figurines, expressing in very loose symbolic form the identity and attitude of the artist.
Is that... Doesn't he have something that he ends up... Someone famous has, like, his art. Shit. I can't remember. That was bad. Comment to make. I want to say it was someone from like Led Zeppelin, but maybe I'm wrong. It's like one of that like
Jimmy Page?
Maybe like someone.
Jimmy Page would be the
has
one, I think.
His like self-portrait or something. Is that what you're talking about? No.
This is he did a number of self-portraits, but this one's the most
okay.
famous of them. It's got this desk of weird tchotchkes all around it. After publishing Satyrs, he had his first West End exhibition at the Bruton Gallery, where George Bernard Shaw first commented on his work, calling it too strong medicine for the average man.
That's what people have also
What?
said about me, too.
I have heard that. Yes, Jacob.
Shaw was sort of great at like saying things about other people's art. He's just this great commentator of the period. So I think that was kind of like a compliment. It was just
I
like
can't
his work
tell.
is too intense for people.
Okay. I thought it was like a backhanded compliment, but
There's always a little bit of element of that, I think. But Shaw wasn't the only celebrity to cross Spare's path at this exhibition. Also, at the Bruton Gallery, Spare first encountered, here we go, Aleister Crowley. Striding up to him, the Beast announced himself as the Vice-Regent of God upon
Man,
Earth.
what a man.
fucking right.
Crowley admired Spare's art and was among a growing crew of his patrons. Remember, Crowley was reasonably wealthy at varying points of his life.
Wait, so where is he right now? Like in his
It's 1907.
status? Okay.
Crowley's he's this is like his rising occult years. He's pretty
Okay,
famous,
yeah. All right.
especially in those circles. So he's admiring him, and the patrons were but the most wealthy of his patrons was a man named Pickford Waller. Crowley commissioned a series of pieces from Spare for his journal Equinox, and also gave Spare an expensive ceremonial robe, and recommended him to the journal editor Holbrook Jackson.
Wow.
The
He
exact
set him
nature,
up.
yeah, he's making connections. But here's where it gets a little fuzzy. The exact nature of Crowley's relationship with Spare is subject to some speculation. Crowley was, as many of our listeners know, bisexual. His homosexual acts with Neuburg, a mutual friend, fairly well documented, and we've talked about them. So check out at least our first Crowley episode. Spare had a following among gay patrons and expressed a strong interest in alternative sexualities in his writing and in his art. Crowley and Spare may have had a physical relationship at one point. In his collection, The Winged Beetle, Crowley's poem The Twins was dedicated to Spare. Jacob, I'm actually going to have you read this segment of the poem, because you've done Crowley's voice for us, right?
Yeah, I have.
All right, check it out. Give it a read.
I, O son of my mother, that snarled and clawed in her womb, as now we rave in our rapture, I know thee, I love thee, brother. Incestuous males that consume the light and life that we capture, come then, conquer and kiss me, says the poet. Come, what hinders? Believe me.
pretty hot.
Ooh.
So they were definitely
Oh.
banging, right?
Dang.
Like, definitely,
Yeah, that
It's dedicated to
that-
Spare, yeah.
definitely
that was
banging.
pretty
Okay,
explicit,
cool.
right? Like
Yeah, that
If
was
they
like
weren't
in
banging,
your face. They wanted
It could
to.
be that, yeah, Crowley wanted to at
he was
least.
definitely making some moves.
I'm not,
I respect his
bringing
game.
up twincest for no one,
Yeah.
you know?
only girls I'm really into do I talk
Only
about
the
incest
really,
with.
Yeah.
just really special
Oh, yeah.
people, you know?
Okay, so in the poem, they go on to writhe and thrill and blithe and lithe.
I bet they do.
Oof.
Until the spasm that kills them.
Oh,
Oh my
man.
god!
Getting really heated. Hot
Super
and heavy.
hot.
Oh god, I'm so immature.
That's amazing.
So Spare actually joined Crowley's Argentia Astrum in July 1909, being only the 7th member of that group.
Oh.
He was clearly inspired by Crowley's ideas as reflected in his own occult practice, but he also took much of Crowley's performance of self with a grain of salt. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. One of my favorite stories that Spare told about him and Crowley, which we have to take with our own grain of salt because it involves two of the more notorious fabricators of the time period, namely Aleister Crowley and Osman Spare. The story goes like this. It begins with the fact that Crowley enjoyed exotic foods, especially aphrodisiacs. So one day, Spare prepared some cakes for Crowley for an afternoon tea, telling him that they'd been derived from an old Chinese Tang Dynasty recipe. As Crowley was enjoying the cakes, Spare bubbled and boiled over with the secret of the incredibly gross practical joke he'd played. The cakes, he said, had been made with horse and dog feces. Poop. But this is the best part. Spare reports that for his part, Crowley retained his bland expression and said simply, "I guessed as much."
Wow.
That's on brand, maybe. Okay.
You are eating horse
Like,
poop.
So
I guessed as much.
You know,
Your
he's
point?
rolling with the punches. It's just
I respect it. Yeah.
I mean, Crowley was known for eating all sorts of gross things, so. In any case, relations between the two eventually soured, as relations between Crowley and pretty much anyone always did. And that's all we have to say about that exchange. Around this same time, Spare met his future mother-in-law sitting at a bar in a public house. Or a pub, as you might call them. Short for public house. She told him about her daughter, Eily, a chorus girl with a baby whose father had abandoned her. Spare fell in love with Eily, and Eily pretended to be pregnant. And on the 4th of September 1911, they got married. Romance.
okay.
During World War I, Spare claimed that he had been stationed in Egypt and studied hieroglyphics there. I keep using the word claim because Spare tells a lot of tales. He claimed to have spent a night under a pile of corpses at the battlefront and remaining calmly on board a troop carrier when it was struck by a torpedo and someone shouted "abandoned ship," making him the only survivor. Actually, Spare worked as a medical orderly giving tetanus shots to new soldiers and served in Colonel Solomon's let me say that one more time. Colonel Solomon's camouflage section. Where he designed camouflage, which better suited his talents, because he's, of course, an artistic guy, and he helped to illustrate the historical record of the war. During the course of the war, he separated from his wife, whose interests never quite aligned with his, although they never formally divorced. Because divorce was not a thing you easily could do, even if your wife pretended to be pregnant to get you to marry her. He self-published his Book of Pleasures in 1913, articulating some of the theories that would mark Spare as a proto-surrealist, although his art properly belonged to the symbolist era, for my art nerds out there. Let's talk a little bit about that, because Olivia and Jacob have both been through my History of Western Performance class. Symbolism took its inspiration from the ancient pagan culture, various pagan cultures, and sought to express the inner rather than the external actions of its subjects. It's interested in the inner life. Symbolism communicates the barely conscious rather than the unconscious or subconscious, using open symbols that are evocative but whose meaning is uncertain. I'll give you an example that maybe most of our listeners are probably familiar with. Edgar Allan Poe was considered an early symbolist. He was before the, big period of symbolism, which was the late 19th century into the early 20th. His raven speaks to the inner pain and struggle of the central character in the poem The Raven. But what it actually represents, the character's death or maybe some form of guilt or just anguish, it's not possible for us to pin that down. That's how symbolism functions. So while we have these symbols that are doing all this expression of our inner life, we can't say exactly what they mean. Then we know we're working with symbolism. Chekhov's seagull, all these sorts of symbols out there. Like, what the hell is the seagull? We don't know. The telltale heart, to some extent, although it's a bit more obvious. But the raven is sort of perfect. The multicolored rooms in the Mask of the Red Death. Or oft-referenced cask in the Cask of Amontillado. Or Amontillado.
Oh, no.
Some debate about that.
I'm having
That's what I was
flashbacks
about
right
to say,
now.
like PTSD from this.
Yeah, we've done a lot of Poe stories. But also, we don't know what those exactly mean. The meaning of those is sort of open and open to interpretation. They evoke many associations. In the case of the Red Death, excess and pleasure and arrogance and preoccupation. Also the cask, really, the same things. But they're all of these things, and they're also something more than all of these things. That's the essence of symbolism. So Spare's satyr-like men and goats and figurines and masks and animal heads and skulls, all on his desk with him behind them, they're all sort of serving a similar purpose. They create a feeling that draws out the interaction of the subject, but they slither away from being assigned any single meaning. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You guys remember this from class? Do you think it would make sense if you didn't remember this from class? Those who haven't had class with me, of our listeners, who are a whole lot more of people than you.
I mean, I would assume so.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Write us if you'd like me to explain symbolism some more. After the war, Spare developed an interest in radio, a hobby that would sometimes help him to make ends meet when times were tight. In the 1930s, he began experimenting with, anamorphs is what he called them, which was a kind of painting that distorts the image by elongating it. The style has become popular with street art to make it appear like there are three-dimensional things playing with the viewer's depth perception. Have you seen this?
You move from different angles and it changes it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's basically an anamorph. So he would do these on paper. He preferred vertical distortions of the images he painted. That's why I brought you in, Jacob, today, because I know you're into
Art.
visual things. Yeah. So in 1936, Salvador Dali had a London exhibition, and with a new vogue for surrealist art taking over the cultural scene, Spare's friends sought to claim his place as the proto-surrealist, or the great British surrealist before surrealism was cool. So they want to, make England first to the party. It wasn't Dali, it was this guy, Osman Spare. Spare had actually, so there's a case to be made that he was a proto-surrealist, meaning, a surrealist before there was surrealism, proto. He had championed automatic drawing and automatic writing, guided by subconscious familiars from very early in his career. So when we think about surrealism, that's really what we're talking about, is the expression of subconscious thought. And he was already engaged in a lot of that with his occult practice and also with his art. His surrealist forecast racing cards involved secret messages that purchasers were meant to memorize before destroying the cards, allowing the message to percolate in the subconscious. This is going to become big to his chaos magic theory, or his theories that, would go on to inspire chaos magic. Surrealism had its most productive life in painting, although its great progenitor, André Breton, also favored its presence in literature through the practice of automatic writing. Automatic anything is an attempt to express the subconscious or unconscious thoughts of the artist out into the world without the intervention of the ego or conscious mind. The artist writes or draws without thinking. Surrealism utilized art as a vehicle to achieve a synthesis between dreams and reality, easily seen in the work of Dali or René Magritte or Max Ernst or Man Ray. Things you can Google after the episode.
Like writing it down. Yes.
Yes. René Magritte's got the train coming out of the fireplace, and Dali's got all the, distorted clocks and things. It's this dream world, this dream reality. They wanted to make the familiar, meaning the quotidian aspects of our ordinary lives, strange in the way that dreams make the contents of our lives unfamiliar and sometimes threatening. Dali's melting clocks or Man Ray's overlay of a violin's markings on a woman's naked back essentially make the violin and the woman strange to us, right? They become unusual through our perception. Much of Spare's occultism had a powerful surrealist feeling to it, with spirits as his intermediaries with the subconscious realm. Breaking the control of the ego and delving into the depths of the subconscious was the occultist's prime objective.
The soul is the ancestral animals, the body the knowledge. This omnivorous soul, how lasty. It would seem to be everlasting in its suicide. Complex desire is the further creation of different desire, not the realization of particular desire. Make thy desire subconscious. The organic is creative impulse to will. Beware of thy desire. Let it be something that implies nothing but itself.
Producing desired objects and results is about forgetting the desire so that the subconscious mind can work on realizing it. A conscious request is not nearly as powerful as a subconscious request, and so rather than ask the spirits or the universe for a Cadillac, the magician should forget that he wants a Cadillac, and the Cadillac will in due time arrive by the power of the subconscious.
That's what I
that?
do in life too. Just will it.
Yeah, well, you will it and then you forget it. So it's not exactly the
okay.
secret. You got to will it, put it in your head, law of attraction, I guess, but it's not quite that. It's not that new age principle because you've got to forget that you want it. Otherwise, your subconscious mind can't work the problem. If you read Spare closely, it appears that the desire for anything in particular, like a Cadillac, is actually an error. Desire should be its own end, meaning that there should be no object in the conscious, physical world that you actually want. The subjects of desire should be the desires themselves. We should just be cultivating desire. I desire to have more desire. The subconscious shouldn't be the tool of the conscious, but the beginning and end of the magician's undertaking. It should all be about elevating that subconscious self. He was a big fan of theosophy and, via Blavatsky, also Hinduism. His writing makes regular reference to reincarnation and embraces the notion of the transcendence of ego, which he relates to his concept, which he calls Kia, K-I-A. Transcendence of ego is not a Gnostic or Buddhist overcoming of desire in his estimation, but rather a complete embodiment of desire. He says one becomes the thing itself or its creature. You see what he means? You become your desire or you become a slave to your desire. And it is preferable to be our desire rather than a slave to our desire. There's a deep sensuousness to Spare's occultism. We embody our subconscious selves and act and desire from the realm of our ancestral animals. This is his concept of mysticism or magical ecstasy. This is clearest in his conceptualization of sex. Ready for this?
Yes. Always.
Jacob's always ready. Always ready for sex talk. Spare sought to indulge sexual desire below the surface of the ego and mine the depths of subconscious sexuality. This was a theme of both his occultism and his art. There had been rumors that survived long after his death that Spare had been a purveyor of erotic images, although for a long while nothing more graphic than the standard artistic nudes could be attributed to him. His friends talked about him trading in dirty pictures, though, and most believed that if they existed, they'd been destroyed by a well-meaning associate shortly after his death. But in 2009, an album surfaced that solved the mystery, containing images of erections, hardcore penetration, and all manner of orgiastic activities.
Wow. Mystery solved.
Yep. So he made that early 20th century erotica. Spare had a form of sex magic in which a sigil was inserted into a masturbation device like a suction cup.
What?
You following me? So you need a suction cup that you're going to stick on your wang.
Okay. Got it.
I never know what I'm going to use as my euphemism for penis. I'm really proud that I said wang just then.
I don't think I've ever heard you say it before. It
came out so naturally.
It really did.
It really did.
It's alarming.
Yeah.
You stick the suction cup on your wang. I'm going to stick with it now. And the suction cup is going to prolong your orgasm and allow the magician to use the experience of the orgasm to access the subconscious realm and make the desired request mentally. Whatever you're requesting, you're going to make that request through the orgasm, and you're masturbating into the cup. Got me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a sigil inside the cup that your fluids are going onto.
So,
Yes.
The cup, also known as an urn, was then buried in a casket filled with dirt, or actually placed in the ground at a waning quarter moon at midnight.
Okay.
It's getting a little pagan-y now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Days later, or at least ceremonial, days later, during the new moon, you disinter the urn, replenish the supply, you know what I'm talking about, and then pour the contents onto the earth while repeating an incantation.
Okay.
And that's how you get your sigil going. That's it. That's my whole system. I'm
Wow.
done there. That's it. That's what you do. That's enough. That'll keep you busy.
I was about to say, that's
That's
a
a lot.
long process.
It could be longer. Like Crowley, we're talking about months and months of summoning the
true.
demonic kings and stuff. But this is more to the point. Spare, it's a little involved, but it gets to the point. An important part of Spare's system was the abandonment of bourgeois values and mainstream controls of sexual ethics. We're with him there. I think I might be with him on all of this. I'm delighted by this whole... I gotta be honest. I just find him a delightful person. Only when a person thought and acted from their own values, particularly sexual values and desires, could they be truly free and capable of accomplishing magical ends. I'm going to say this again because I think this is so important. Only when a person thought and acted from their own values, particularly their sexual values and desires, could they be truly free and capable of accomplishing magical ends.
Wow. That's really nice.
Yeah, be you, right? I mean,
Yeah.
here's a man long before we've sort of like conceptualized homosexuality. Maybe not long before, but like we're still not at a period where we're saying there are no gay rights in 1930.
There really wasn't until recently, so yeah.
Right. I mean, let alone that, you know, the newest trends, you know, with trans rights and non-binary. And yet he's saying essentially to all of these people, but also, you know, you and me, Olivia, get those fantasies out there. Don't be ashamed of them. Embrace them. And then you can truly embrace your power.
It's like a little touch of Satanism, just like a drop of Satanism in there.
Just a little
You know?
drop.
Just a little drop.
Or Satanism is drawing drops from him.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. In The Anathema of Zos, one of his later works, which Spare wrote automatically, he tells the story of a matting horde of stinking humanity who seeks enlightenment from his protagonist, namely Zos. Deeply contemptuous of his audience, but anxious for the opportunity to speak, the cantankerous Zos gives a sermon and then falls into a deep sleep. When he awakens, he discovers himself surrounded by swine and wonders if he had been speaking to pigs the whole time. Yeah, love that symbolism.
I, who enjoy my body with unweary tread, would rather pack with wolves than enter your pest houses. You've muddled time and ego. Think ye to curb the semen sentimentally? You deny sexuality with tinsel ethics, live by slaughter, pray to greater idiots.
In The Focus of Life, Spare expressed impatience with traditional heteronormative monogamy. He privileged, somewhat vaguely, alternative sexualities, but also self-pleasure, the title of his first book. A lot of crusading against masturbation through the 19th century and into the 20th century, even up to now, right?
Yeah.
Even in the occult communities, there are prohibitions against masturbation, but he's saying, go for it, have fun.
I like this dude.
Cast into demoniacal molds, human nature is the worst possible nature. The degenerate need women. Dispense with that part of thyself. Awake. The time has come for new sexualities. Then would be occasion for greater pleasures. To improve the species, ye men must love one another. Will unto self-love, the unexhausted, the procreative of ecstasy. Where is life, there is will unto pleasure, however paradoxical the manifestation.
Spare's sexual ectoplasm apparently engendered elemental automata who would proceed to have sex with each other during his workings. So like golems, little sex golems.
I don't know why just sex golem sounds funny. Sorry.
Sex, maybe that'll be our next merch item of sex golems.
Sex golems.
Another theme of Spare's sex golem. It could be that's a label.
There we go. Oh, just like a little name tag, like on his shirt. It just says sex golem.
Sex golem.
Yeah.
I'm an occult confession sex golem.
That should be a Patreon tier level.
Oh yeah.
Sex golem. Is that
That's
the
the
lowest
top-
or the highest
No,
tier?
that's the top tier.
Oh,
Top
most
tier.
definitely.
Another theme of his sexual magic and his art was the transformation of age into sensuous and alluring youth. Spare believed that personal transmutation of the traditionally ugly into something beautiful opened onto new pleasures beyond fear. He advised that we treat with utmost contempt those things the world reveres most. I gotta say that one more time. He advised that we treat with utmost contempt those things that the world reveres most. So when we're talking about this teeny bopper, TikTok-y whatever, this is what Spare is saying, turn your back on. He's saying find the beauty in the older woman or older gentleman. Find the beauty in the stuff that is rejected by society. See how beautiful that is. And a lot of his art really reflects this.
Trying to decide if this dude and Oscar Wilde would get along or hate each other.
Yeah, I think that's a toss-up.
Because sometimes it's like
50-50.
some of his like what Spare is saying is like a little bit of like you know what I'm trying to say.
Aesthetic, meaning like, yeah, I see.
Yeah, but then some of it I'm like, oh, Oscar Wilde can hate that shit. Like
Yeah.
Oh, you mean aesthetic, yeah, like artsy.
like
art for
aestheticism.
art's sake.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
trying
yeah,
to
yeah,
say.
yeah.
I
Yeah, I know
couldn't
what you
say it, but anyway, I
got there.
diverge.
Not like a Buddhist in the woods depriving himself, but
No,
somebody
like-
who's art for art's sake, indulging in the artistic.
Yeah, like what
being,
you were saying
yeah.
about like what he was just saying about ugly, finding beauty in ugly, and I don't know. Anyway,
Spare could not identify the occult intelligence that worked through him, but he was aware of a spirit guide named Black Eagle who worked with him, as well as a host of familiar spirits that surrounded him but eluded his attention. Spare developed a system of communication with these invisible spirits that relied on the creation of sigils. His probably most notable contribution to chaos magic. Sigils were a graphic interpretation of Spare's subconscious experience, and he argued that each person should develop their own sigils in order to achieve occult contact with the spirit realms. The more a person believes in a sigil, the more powerfully it accesses the subconscious of the practitioner, and this raises the ability to project the image into the mind of another. Sigils were an appropriate replacement for language, which Spare found incapable of expressing the true depths of the subconscious. I totally agree with him there.
True wisdom cannot be expressed by articulate sounds. The language of fools is words. In the labyrinth of the alphabet, the truth is hidden.
Spare had developed his own sigil alphabet, which he used to conjure. Sigils could also be used to influence the natural world. In one story, the novelist Robert Hugh Benson asked a 17-year-old Spare if he could conjure a thunderstorm. Spare drew a sigil, and sure enough, a thunderstorm arrived. Benson introduced Spare to Everard Fielding of the Society for Psychical Research. Fielding imagined an object, and without telling Spare what it was, asked Spare to produce it. After Spare drew a couple of sigils to conjure the necessary spirits to read Fielding's mind and produce the object, Fielding's valet arrived many hours early with his slippers, exactly the object he'd been picturing. So good job, Spare. And now Hitler. In 1936... just 3 years before Germany annexed Czechoslovakia, Spare received a request from Adolf Hitler to paint his portrait. Someone in the German embassy had purchased a portrait, perhaps a surrealist overlay of Spare's own face on top of Hitler's, which Spare did these sorts of things all the time, these sort of surrealist overlay images. In one story of this request, Spare wrote back,
Only from your negations can I wholesomely conceive you. For I know of no courage sufficient to stomach your aspirations and ultimates. If you are a Superman, let me be forever animal.
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
Wow.
take that.
Yeah, I was
Take
about
that.
to say. Just backhanded him, essentially. Go him.
Yeah, if you're the fascist Uberman, then yeah, I'm out. Spare told another version where he went... So he told several versions of this story. One has him going to Germany, painting the portrait, bringing it back, and incorporating it into anti-Nazi propaganda for the British. So who knows? They're fun stories, though, that he makes up. He was clearly anti-fascist, and I'm with him there. So, in 1934, he began a decades-long project of painting Cockney portraits of working-class people, getting back to this making finding beauty everywhere, or in places where he traditionally wouldn't. He would paint Woolworth's shop girls who worked below his apartment, also char ladies and spivs, higglers and tapsters, billiard cue makers and taxi drivers. I only know what some of those are.
I was about to say, most of that just went right over my head.
Yeah, so if anyone in the UK wants to tell us what a spiv or a higgler or a tapster is, by all means. In the winter of 1940, during the German bombing campaign in London, a bomb went through his roof. The Nazis, of course, bombing London. A bomb went through his roof and landed on the floor below, unexploded. Although his studio had been disheveled by the projectile, unexploded artillery was a fairly dangerous thing to live above, as you can imagine. Spare appears to have simply gone back to work, though. But then a second bomb actually exploded in his studio while he was out on fire watching duty, which is something you would do during the bombing. You would go and see if anything was on fire so you could alert the authorities. And it destroyed anything he'd been working on, 200 or 300 pictures, he said, depriving him of a place to live as well.
Aww.
He moved into... So you can see I was so hostile to Hitler, both in principle, but also...
Yeah.
Personal vengeance.
Yeah.
He moved into the basement apartment of a friend, the model Ada Payne, where he'd lived through one of the roughest patches of his life. Falling into relative obscurity, he became a starving artist, using newspapers for plates and living on milk some days.
Oh.
In 1946, Spare began a slow but steady comeback, and 3 years later he met a key figure in the creation of the legend of Spare as the founder of chaos magic. I'm speaking of Kenneth Grant. After World War II, Grant had written to an elderly Crowley and ended up working with Aleister Crowley as a kind of general secretary. Grant also became an interpreter of works by Arthur Machen, Sax Rohmer, and H.P. Lovecraft, reading dark mystical messages into their short stories and novels. Grant met Osman Spare through Grant's wife Steffi, who was an art model, and he went on to write a series of books about Spare, beginning with his inclusion in Grant's book, The Magical Revival. Grant's significance in translating Spare cannot be overstated. Spare's work is, as you may have gleaned from some of the quotes we've lifted for today's episode, very challenging to read. It's often completed using automatic writing techniques. It's repetitive. I'm saying this because I've read it. It's repetitive. It's filled with strange and undecipherable references and vacillates between a more modern and an old English mode of speech, using words like ye and thou and, my favorite, verily.
It's a fun word.
Right? We should just work that into a conversation more often. Beyond that, Spare was, despite his relative genius, a largely forgotten figure, and wouldn't have drawn the interest of this podcast or our listeners but for Grant promoting him as what would become the first chaos magician, adopting Grant's explanation of Spare's process as the seeds for the chaos magician's own work. He literally is not the first chaos magician. Those guys don't come around until the 1970s, but they sort of consider Spare the godfather or grandfather. Grant formed a religion, and this is all based on Grant's work, what Kenneth Grant had to say about him. So Grant formed a religion based on Spare's ideas, which he called the Zoskia cultus. It was never formally organized as any sort of cult or fraternal body, though. It was more theoretical. Mm-hmm. At the time, Grant was focused on creating his own lodge, the New Isis Lodge, within Crowley's OTO, shortly after Master Crowley's death. Grant's own occultism was a blend of various sources, including Crowley, but also Spare, Hinduism, and even some UFOology. So I don't want to give the impression that Grant practiced as an Osman Spare traditionalist. He established a Spare practice that he incorporated into his practice and encouraged others to do the same. Grant, by the way, is also incredibly difficult to read. He writes a lot of books, but they're often very difficult to get through. With his wife Steffi, he introduced Spare to Gerald Gardner, a founder of the modern neo-pagan movement, and the two argued over who had actually ever encountered a real witch cult. Can you imagine this meeting? Gardner claimed to have based his witch religion on a real coven he discovered and studied with. Spare and his Mrs. Patterson, but also vivid dreams of witches' Sabbaths, which informed his impression of the so-called witch cult, more or less formed that argument. So Spare said, well, I knew him first. Gardner saying, well, I knew him first. Spare claimed to have assisted Gardner to lift a curse that had been placed on him in exchange for a check for the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. So Spare said, I'll help you lift this curse if you donate to the prevention of cruelty of animals.
I love that.
Love that, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
The donation was actually part of the ritual, so the donation was part of lifting the curse.
Wow.
In return, Spare sent him a sigil to return the evil sent against him on a boomerang principle. So sort of send the evil back to where it came from. In 1949, Spare started doing pub shows, gallery exhibitions in pub houses where he sold his art for a price that regular people could afford. So he becomes a sort of public artist. His pub shows were a great success and helped raise Spare out of his financial straits. In 1955, he appeared on the program Unusual Beliefs, unaware that the premise of the show was to mock its subjects for their unusual beliefs. The show took Spare's words out of context and broadcast his assertion that he could kill a man in 2 weeks with a curse for comic effect.
Jeez.
Yeah. But, in curses that kill, it's possible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's conceivable. The television program would not have been especially impressed by the coincidence, though, between Spare's claims and those of tribal cultures where people do die of the evil eye. So let's bring it on home here. Spare died on the 15th of May, 1956, having lived an eccentric life, bridging the worlds of art and occultism. He was ahead of his time, both in his surrealist artistic techniques and in his theories that would go on to inspire chaos magic. As with most men ahead of his time, he lived on the margins. Hailed as a boy genius, he spent most of his life creating in the spaces outside the dominant culture, illuminating forms of beauty that the mainstream tended to call ugly. It's significant that Grant started Spare's religion for him. In Zos, Spare rejected the notion of establishing any fixed system for others to follow, as well as the concept of himself or any man as a genius or guru worthy of following. In line with the existentialists and even the postmodernists who would follow after his death, but also the Buddha long before him, Spare argued that we must follow ourselves, discover our own inner desires, and create our own sigils, whatever that might mean to us, if we are ever to truly transcend.
Cursed are ye who shall be persecuted for my sake, for I say I am convention entire, excessively evil, perverted, and nowhere good for ye. Whosoever would be with me is neither much of me, nor of himself enough. Worm-ridden jackals. Still would ye feast on my vomit? Whosoever follows me becomes his own enemy, for in that day my exigency shall be his ruin.
Whosoever would be with me is neither much of me, nor of himself enough. Whosoever follows me becomes his own enemy, for in that day my exigency shall be his ruin.
That's insane.
I was about to say that's a pretty big warning to be like, don't follow.
What was
Me.
that one line that you said in the beginning? I kept thinking, what was it? Convention.
Cursed are ye who would be persecuted for my sake?
No, convention entire or
Oh.
something.
For I am convention entire.
Yeah, I don't know
Wow.
why that freaks me out.
That's crazy.
That really yeah.
Well, because he's definitely not, right? But this
Yeah.
point
Yeah.
is you should follow no one. You need to make your own
Right.
way.
Which that's something that I mean, after diverging a little bit from my beliefs as a kid, I've kind of like started to follow more and be like, it's more of like my own like personal journey, what I decide to believe in and stuff. So I really like resonate with a lot of like what he said, but then now I feel like bad being like, oh yeah, no, I like this dude. So,
Why do you feel bad?
I don't know, because he just said don't.
Oh, you can like him,
Yeah.
but just
Just don't
the point is,
follow.
yeah, don't copy, don't try to do your own thing, right? To
Yeah.
follow him would be to do your own thing and find your own desires and make your own sigils, not to, sort of take up everything he did and just replicate it.
Yeah.
See, I think that's so interesting because I guess we'll talk about it like in this series as we talk about like more modern chaos magic, but I feel like chaos magic now doesn't really abide by that kind of thought. Do you know what I mean?
Spare's
very
definitely a
rigid.
purist.
Yeah.
There's a lot of I think there are a lot of ceremonial components for some chaos magicians. I think there's a lot of like variety within the chaos magic community. There are some folks who I think are very much in a Spare tradition, who are literally doing their own thing and calling it chaos magic.
Yeah. But
And
they
then
would
they're outliers, maybe, is what you think.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I was
don't
gonna
really
say
know.
they would probably be looked a little bit down on, because I don't know, as someone that kind of like a little bit tried to dabble into the community. Well, I feel like we should put out a little bit of a warning when we do this series. Like, don't just listen to this and then dive in and think you can just start doing chaos magic.
Yeah.
Because, yeah. I think it's really easy to invite a lot of things that you don't want by doing it and not.
Well, it's one of those things that for one, you shouldn't just like dive in right away without like knowing, I won't say like everything, but like at least having a general like knowledge of what you're getting into.
I guess that I had an experience, and that's why I said that I'm not doing it anymore. Because
You had a negative experience supernaturally, you mean, or occult-wise?
Yeah.
Negative practice experience.
I'm like, yeah. I was pretty convinced for a while that I basically brought something really bad on through something that I did.
Oh.
And I'm not sure, like, I don't know that I still think that entirely, but I do think it probably coincide. I guess what I'm saying is be careful what you wish for.
I would say that none of our episodes should be used as a guide for practice, because we don't want...
Yes.
I mean, our point is to sort of outline these practices and let you know what's out there. And I think in the Spare mindset, which, Jacob, I also do without any guilt, I love the Spare mindset.
I was about to say, I'm very into him, and I probably after this I will start researching him more, but I won't follow him, but I'll research it.
Yeah. Let me know. I've got these books, man.
Oh,
I got
cool.
all these books I've read now. So I'll pass them on. But
Sweet.
we don't really. Our plan, I think, here is to get folks to think about all the options that are out there with the mind that. I mean, what I've increasingly been saying lately is, the search for God, whatever that means, is something you need to give attention to, and that's that spirituality. That's what it's all about. I think it's not enough to just say, "Oh, I'm spiritual," I believe, and then you're off the hook. But that doesn't mean that you need to then adopt a specific tradition and act like it's the one true route, because everyone has a different path. It just means that you have to give that time and attention. Okay.
That makes sense.
Not to end it on a weird note, sorry. But
No.
I just
Well,
feel
I mean,
like there
that was-
should be some
Should be
kind
what?
of warning.
No, I think
a
that's
little
good.
bit
No,
in
that's
place
good.
as we dive into this, because
Yeah.
I know I've experienced myself. I just want other people to be cautious.
There are other podcasts, and maybe podcast is not the best way to begin a practice, but there's other podcasts that you could get into that explore practice and talk about practice. There's books and things you should pick up, and communities I think you should join, really. You should have people around you who have ideas about how this works. When we do our weird, artsy, occulty stuff, we're doing it together.
Yeah.
And that does help check any impulse,
Yeah.
But yeah, Olivia, going forward, I think we can explore this question of the Spare approach, which is very open-ended, and the ceremonial magic approach, because Crowley is also a big influence on chaos magic, and Crowley is super ceremonial. So I think there's these twin influences are pushing chaos magic in various directions. All right, let's gong it on into that order of confessors. Baby Squirrelington says,
Oh my god. Baby Squirrelington.
Baby
sorry.
Squirrelington says that we are the squirrel's favorite YT people, yeet people, which I found out by Googling it means white people.
Hell yeah.
It means white people.
Yes. We are Baby Squirrelington's favorite whitey-ass whiteys.
I know that's right. Thank you.
We make pixie.
Did you?
Are you okay?
Yeah, that's what it
Are
says.
there a bunch of E's in the name?
There's a lot of E's,
Okay.
yes.
Oh my god. Rob's having a stroke.
we make pixie.
I was like, do we need to call someone? Like,
happy when Pixie is sad. We make Pixie happy.
Aw.
That's nice.
Jenny C says listening to the Alchemical Actors is like sitting down with a group of friends to talk all things spooky and strange. That's what we're going for,
Aw,
Jenny. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Ronnie Lane has some interesting notes. Our friend Ronnie Lane over on Castbox. Love the notes Ronnie Lane leaves for us. This is a comment on our episode about Wendigos. Ronnie says that cannibalism risks prion disease, which is kind of like mad cow disease. A prion is a modified protein that attacks and modifies other proteins. You guys know about this?
Yeah.
My grandmother died
That's
from
wild.
mad cow
Yeah.
disease.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's before they knew what it was, though.
Wow.
He also says, in a sort of side note, cannibalism is not illegal in the U.S., but desecration of a corpse is. So that's what you would be charged with.
Choose your
Right.
battles.
And animal's blood has similar culinary properties to egg whites.
What?
Huh.
To egg whites?
I could.
Wait, I need more of an
Wait a
explanation on
second.
this, because I've been watching a lot of guys' grocery games.
Is that like
and
a
I need-
substitute for egg whites?
Ronnie, write in occultconfessions
'Cause-
@gmail.com. Let us know about these egg
I mean,
whites.
I'm a vegan now, but I'm also allergic to eggs, and that would have been nice to know if I could just be
To
using
sub it with animal blood.
Can you imagine like coming over while I'm making like eggs and just
You're like, I'm a vegan, but I sub out everything with animal blood.
so
That exception.
yeah. What,
One caveat.
Oh my god, okay.
Finally, Charlie H. mentioned the connection to a scary stories to tell in the dark with our Wendigo episode, where Defago actually turns to ash. So there's a retelling of the Defago story from the top. Also, Diablo 2, there's Wendigo, I guess. And Charlie is another one of our welder listeners. So love to the welders. Love
We
to the
have a
welders.
couple of those, don't we?
I think we have more than a couple. I think we are increasingly popular with the welding community.
you found your
I mean,
niche.
I feel like welders
here.
have to like podcasts, right? What else are
welders,
you doing with
and
your
I think
time?
that a lot
when
of
you
welders
work?
are into occulty stuff.
Yeah.
You
right?
know,
They
I'm
make-
honestly not surprised for some reason.
So I feel like in their spare time, some of the welders I know make like, Renaissance fair stuff. So the knights and
Yeah.
all that. So I feel like they get into it maybe through that channel.
Ooh, some forging and fire. Oh, sorry.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
I keep talking about this show like
It's
every
a-
podcast.
it's a really
I'm
good show.
sorry. Yeah, anyway.
Our sources today included Phil Baker's biography of Austin Osman Spare, Kenneth Grant's The Magical Revival, and also the writings of Austin Osman Spare, which are produced by Green Book Publications, and Jacob will be receiving from me shortly.
Sweet. I need some reading material for when
There you
I'm
go. You'll
down
get used to
south.
the verilies. I hope you like the word verily and thee and thou.
When you all hear from me again, I'm just going to be talking like that.
Olivia, bring us on home.
I hereby adjourn and declare closed this meeting of the Secret Order of Alchemical Actors till such a time as we get together and do it again.
We want to thank Dan Rosendale for doing the voice of Austin Osman Spare today. Dan, awesome job. Also, Sean Priest giving us the Grant quote. Joining me around the table, I have our Knight of the Dangling Serpent, Jacob Wheatley, who's on his way to Florida, but will still be on the podcast.
Yes. I am traveling down yonder.
Safe travels to
Verily.
Orlando. So if you happen to be in Orlando and you're listening to the podcast and you're not a stalker,
Yeah, that's a
send
key
Jacob a
thing.
message.
Yeah, be like, hey, I'm here too, I guess.
You
Shoot
are a
Jacob a
stalker.
message.
Please put that in the headline.
Yes, at least
Yes.
if you are a stalker,
Ahead
just
of
let
time.
me know.
Yeah.
I'm fine. Well, no, I don't want to say that, but I just rather know ahead of time.
Yeah, just so Jacob knows what he's getting into.
yeah.
Olivia Littoral, who is not leaving this great state of Maryland.
Nope. Someone, if anyone knows that if my Led Zeppelin thing was right,
Oh,
can
yeah.
someone let me
Let us
know?
know.
There's like
Yeah.
in the deep part of my mind, I feel like
Hey, follow
Jimmy
your
Page
intuition.
feels like he could own it. Yeah.
that seems right? Like, anyway, yes.
My name is Rob C. Thompson. Join us next time. We're gonna have a bit of fun. We're gonna talk about several groups that inspired the Chaos Magicians, namely the Discordians, and then their inheritors of the Discordian tradition, the Church of the Subgenius. Next time
Ooh.
here on Occult Confessions.